Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. So my name is Kyle, and I'm the Executive Director of Honua Scholars. Our mission is to highlight Native Hawaiian value-based STEM practices, inspiring individuals from all backgrounds to synthesize a relationship between their career, their culture, and their community. We aim to increase the overall interest of STEM in Hawaii and provide the tools, guidance, and opportunities necessary for our scholars to foster a connection between the islands and to succeed in their respective fields. So thank you for coming to this webinar uh, entitled What is Graduate School? We always receive a lot of questions about like what grad school is and what graduate student life is like. So we wanted to take this opportunity to address some of those questions. We're gonna go over things like what is it, how do you pay for it, what do you do in graduate school, and why do people do it? Throughout this presentation, if anyone has questions for our panel, you can use the Q&A function at the bottom of the Zoom webinar screen. And we'll also have some time for questions at the end. So I'd like to welcome a few of our awesome panelists. We have Makana Costello-Martin, and you guys can turn on your cameras. She's a software engineer at Amazon, and she previously received her master's in CS at University of Maryland. We also have Kiara Ferrari Wong, who's a PhD candidate in Earth and Planetary Science at UH Manoa, and Sharice Spotkiff, who's a master's student in the Marine Science program at Hawaii Pacific University. So without further ado, I would like to turn it over to Sharice to get this talk started.
Thank you, Kyle. Mihun, can you go to the next slide, please? Perfect, thank you. Okay, so first of all, I want to start off this workshop by addressing the elephant in the room, which is what is graduate school exactly? It's exactly as it sounds like, it's just more school. It's usually in the pursuit of a master's or a doctoral degree, and these can range from anywhere to like 1 to 6 years, 6+ years. And there's usually a research component that's involved, and in addition to very rigorous schoolwork. But unlike your undergraduate level degree, grad school is a lot more customizable. So there is a certain amount of structure, but for the most part, it's your research project and your thesis. So you basically write everything, and it's kind of whatever you want it to be. And a lot of times when you're doing this, it's it's you doing the work, you finding the funding, and you just have your advisor, somebody helping you out along the way to make sure that you can accomplish your goals. Yeah. So in addition to this very independent mindset that you get in graduate school, there's a lot of negative connotations that come with going to grad school. Like you always hear broke grad student or starving grad student, and sometimes that is what happens, but it's not just about being tired and hungry when you're going to grad school. There's always a reason for the struggle. And most of the time it's like you're pursuing a passion that you've always had, or you're looking to, contribute to our overall knowledge, or you're trying to specialize in some kind of field. And I'm not going to lie, there is a financial incentive that comes with having these kinds of degrees. If you have a master's or a doctoral degree, you become more eligible for certain higher level paying jobs or management level jobs. So that's just some of the reasons why you would want to look into going to graduate school. Okay, could you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. And so like some of these careers that are like higher paying, they're not only like management level jobs, they're like university professors. You could also continue doing what you do in grad school, which is be a research scientist. You could do a lot with public health, especially in this age and time, or engineering. But also part of going to graduate school is you get a lot of opportunities to travel. So as you can see in a couple of these pictures, our grad students are in the field, or you go to conferences, and you get to meet a lot of people from around the world when you go to these kinds of conferences, and you can form a lot of collaborations. And could you go to the next slide? Thanks. So another question that we get a lot is, what do you actually do in grad school besides be tired and hungry? And some of those things are research, field work. A lot of the times it's writing and data analysis or trying to fix some kind of problem that you run into. But I would like to turn over at this time to our other panelists so that they can have an opportunity to say what exactly they do in grad school. So
hi, I'm Kiara Ferrari Wong. I'm a graduate student, like Kyle said, at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. And I am in SOAS, which is the School of Oceanography and Earth and all that earth science and planetary science and all of that. So a few things that I do in graduate school, I'm part of a lab run by Paul Lucy. And we look at the moon, and specifically we do remote sensing, which is building spacecraft instrumentation. And we search for volatiles on the moon, which are just anything that like easily evaporates on the moon, like water. So a few things that I was able to do in grad school, which is nice, is get funding for as a graduate assistant, so I don't have to be a teaching assistant. I have no teaching duties in graduate school. And I work using some telescopes. So I use the NASA Infrared Telescope facility. And I also have used SOFIA, which is an airborne observatory. And they stick a telescope on a plane. So that's what I do to search for volatiles on the moon. I also work with instrumentation in labs. So I've worked with the Raman laser system, doing some ice experiments on campus at UH in the HIG building, if you're familiar. And then I also work on a spacecraft team right now where we're going to be sending something up to in low Earth orbit, hopefully by next year. And grad school is not all terrible, at least with my advisor. He takes us to Disney sometimes, which you can see in the upper right-hand corner. He makes sure all of his grad students get to go to Disney, he pays for it and everything. So we're having a pretty good time with him. But I'll pass it over to Makana now so she can tell you about her experience.
Okay. Hi, I'm Makana. Like Kyle said, I'm a software engineer at Amazon right now. I finished my master's in computer science last May. And yeah, so I started grad school at University of Maryland in 2018, right out of undergrad. I finished my undergrad in math and computer science, and I just applied to grad school because I didn't really know what I was going to do or what I wanted to do, but I knew I liked school. And my advisor definitely told me, don't go to grad school because you like school, because even though it's more classes, it is also mostly about research. Yeah, so I went in being like, okay, well, I like math. I haven't taken a crypto class, but like crypto is math adjacent, so I'm gonna try that. So in my first 2 years, while I was there, I was advised by Jonathan Katz. The left two pictures are us and his other students, graduates, at the crypto conference in San Diego 2019. So yeah, like Cherie said earlier, we get to travel a bit for conferences, not the past year since everything was virtual, but yeah. In the other picture with some friends, that was at a Computing Research Association's like grad cohort, which is like these workshops that are supposed to help students in different various stages of grad school, like work through those stages, whether it's like finishing your classes and like identifying your research area or advisor, or if you're in your late career and figuring out like what jobs you want to apply to, whether you want to go into industry or academia. Yeah, and I also, like Sharice and Kiara also said, it's not all sad. I started working out with my friend, one of my grad students' friends. So we started weightlifting together, and I'm very proud that my heaviest squat that I did was 200 pounds, and that's it. So I'll pass it on to Sharice.
thanks, Makana. So hello, like Kyle said, I'm also a grad student. I'm at Hawaii Pacific University. I did both my undergrad and now my grad degree all at Hawaii Pacific University. I'm in my year 3.5, almost 4. So I've been at HPU for like 7 years now. Anyway, so yeah, I've been here a while. I was my my grad student advisor. I was her first student, so I kind of got suckered into it when I was a grad student. I did a project with her and it just turned into, she just happened to have funding for a grad student when I started, so that's how I got into it. So my degree is in marine science, but I actually study viruses from extreme environments. I was fortunate to have gone on a research cruise my second year of grad school. It was pretty hectic, I'm not gonna lie, but it was probably the most fun I've had in grad school. But that was not to say that that's what you do all the time. I was on the cruise for like a month, but yeah, most of the time I spend it behind the computer because I do a lot of bioinformatics, because viruses from extreme environments, you can't really culture them, or you can't really do anything besides study the genetics portion of that, which has been a pretty big learning curve. If you see in that top corner, that like mess of dots and stuff, that is like my pride and joy right now. I spent so long trying to get the network to work. So yeah, and on the cruise, a lot of times I just spent it watching water drip. That was my job. But yeah, so I think that's about it for me. I'm going to turn the workshop over to Kiara now, and she's going to talk about how you prepare for grad school.
Thanks, Charisse. Okay, so we can go to the next slide. The first, I guess, question that you should ask if you're thinking about maybe applying to grad school is it right for you? And there are a few circumstances which might necessitate a degree or might make you want to go to grad school versus going and then having to not need to have gone in the first place. So before you even apply, you should ask yourself, is a graduate degree necessary for entry into your chosen field? That goes for things like lawyers, doctors, like medical doctors and stuff like that. You need those higher level degrees. And then there's also like what I believe Charisse and McConnell were talking about, where, you know, is there a monetary aspect? Is it important for promotions? Is it important for you know, managerial positions in your field? And then also you might need to attend a graduate program in order to make a career change. But the final thing that's really important is that is it a subject that you actually like or that you're passionate about? Because especially if you're doing a multiple year degree, you're going to spend a significant chunk of time working on that. And it can get pretty difficult if you don't like what you're doing. We can go to the next slide, please. So a few things that make you, that might help you in terms of prepping for graduate school is having prior industry or research experience. This is something that is highly recommended for admission into graduate school, but also into like your own insight into understanding if you would actually like to study what you want to go to graduate school for. So depending on which program you're applying for, you might want different amounts of prior experience. If you're applying for a STEM master's or a PhD, you might want to aim for about 2 summers worth of experience and more if possible, but that's highly dependent on whether or not you go to a research-based institution and you have access to that kind of summer program or work program. The other thing you really want to do is get strong letters of recommendations from any of your mentors, and that can be mentors in the lab, or it could be teachers as well in classes that you did really well in undergrad. You're also something that makes you strong for graduate school as well is taking time between undergrad and grad school to gain more work experience. So like in my field, a lot of people do internships or they work at a NASA Space Center before entering graduate school so that they kind of learn the ropes about the industry. If you don't have a school that has opportunities for you in your given field, there are many programs that you can apply to in terms of summer internships that you can take. You can take research experiences for undergrads or REUs, and there are other ones that you can do as well that can help you gain more experience for your resume. And if you happen to do your bachelor's in something that was completely different from what you want to pursue your degree in. So for example, if you did theater, but you really want to be a doctor now, there are post-bac programs that can help you strengthen your application and take prerequisite courses when you apply to grad school. And some post-bac programs even give you stipends in order to make that career change. We could go to the next slide, please. One very important thing, which I didn't do, which I highly recommend doing, is networking and communicating with people. You want to talk to the admissions offices and the specific departments at schools that you're considering, and ask questions about things that you care about. Like, it doesn't have to be about academics at all. It can be the environment. How do they support grad students? Is there a union? Are they trying to unionize or something like that? What is the funding situation? Am I guaranteed funding for 5 years? Are people nice to each other? That kind of thing. The other thing you might want to do is talk with specific faculty you might want to have as a mentor. If you reach out to them ahead of time, letting them know that you're interested in what they do, they might have a position for you, or they might know somebody who does, or they might lead you into the correct direction if you maybe are asking them, but they don't do that research anymore. You could also talk to current faculty at your undergrad institution to see if they have suggestions for you. They are more likely to be well networked than you are, and they will probably point you in the right direction there if they know people who are looking for students. And you should also speak to current and future students in the programs that you are most interested in. They tell you the truth usually, and they usually don't lie to you and say everything's fantastic. They'll tell you the good and the bad, and then that way it'll help you weigh your decision and whether or not you even want to apply there, or if you're choosing between various places, if you want to ultimately attend there. We could go to the next slide, please. Letters of rec or references, which I mentioned before. You want these, they're necessary. I think most schools require 3 of them when you are applying. So even before you start to apply, start to make friends with some of the faculty at your school or your mentors. So try to find people who really like you, or that you did really well in their class, and who have been like strongly involved with your undergraduate education. I do know someone who joined a lab and the PI of that lab, or the principal investigator of the lab, did not like them at all and wrote them a horrible letter of recommendation. They didn't get into med school. So you want to choose these people carefully, and you want to be nice to the people you're asking to write the recommendation letters. So good candidates for those are senior faculty members in your field that you want to go into. But even if you can't, like you can ask if you want to go into a certain field, but you have a biology professor, but maybe you're going into something in chemistry, it's still okay to ask if you did well in bio or something. And then you can also ask them what you, tell them what you want to talk about in their recommendation. So think about what you might want people to say, because sometimes they have you write it yourself and then send it to them. They edit it and send it in. That's been the case for a couple of people I know. You want to make those requests at least 2 months in advance of the deadline, and you always want to follow up that they were submitted in time. Send a follow-up 3 weeks before they're due and be like, have you done this? And then maybe send them candy afterwards, or chocolate, or a card after they've submitted those. What you would want to provide your recommenders when you ask them and they say that they will write you a rec is a copy of your statement of purpose, which is just what you would write in your graduate school application, your personal statement, your CV or resume. And then you also want to send them the list of schools you're applying to, and then the links to those recommender submissions, and then the deadlines for submissions so that they can do it all in time. Finally, transcripts and test scores, I guess, are in here. You want to have transcripts are the official records of your grades and GPA, and they have the information about the difficulties and types of courses that you completed in your undergrad institution. Your GPA doesn't have to be perfect. Mine never was perfect. A 4.0 is not going to guarantee an acceptance because if you have a 4.0 and your recommender doesn't like you, it's not going to really help necessarily. They're also going to be considering the difficulty of the courses you took. So if you took really difficult physics courses and you didn't get a 4.0, as long as you did okay in them and you're not applying to be a pure physicist, right? It's not, always necessary to get an A. You also want to do your research. A school might, or a program might list the average GPA of their applicants, so you can kind of get a ballpark idea of what they're looking for. But it's just an average, and you should apply anyway, even if it's a little bit low. And you shouldn't feel like you're going to get in automatically if your GPA is higher than that. We'll go to the next slide, please. Finally, there's test scores. And like a lot of schools are dropping test requirements nowadays. But if you apply to a school that requires test scores, there's different things. You have to understand which program you're applying to and what they require in terms of standardized tests. They might require the GRE, which is generally for most graduate programs. And then the MCAT would be for medical school, LSATs for law school, GMATs for business school. And I believe there are some others. And you have to know when these tests are being offered. Sometimes you're required to take a GRE subject test. They require a lot more studying than the GRE, and they're only given about twice a year, and you might have to go somewhere special to take it. So you really have to plan those out ahead of time. Or you might want to cross those schools off your list. That's what I did. I crossed off all the schools that required the physics GRE subject test. I didn't want to take it. Some programs will list their average test scores. They're starting to matter less, but you might be able to look at that and see average ballpark of where you need to aim. You don't need a perfect score on the GRE. It tests you on a lot of things. You're going into a highly specialized environment, and you really only need to meet a threshold in terms of reading, writing, and math. I didn't do so well on the math portion, but because I'm good at math in terms of my test scores and stuff, it doesn't really matter. I met a threshold and I didn't get a perfect score, but I still got into graduate school. So it's just a way for your application to make it through the door. And so you don't have to worry too much as long as you get a high enough test score. If you take your test in the spring or summer, your results are well known well before you make your program choices. So it might help you inform which schools to send those to. And then also it helps in terms of funding. If you are looking into getting fellowships, scholarships, or other funding sources, they might require a certain GRE score or other test score to give you those. I will pass it along to, I believe Makana's next to talk about applying to graduate school.
Yep, it is me. Okay, so we'll just quickly go through like the application season. So in August through September, you start asking for letters of recommendation. And yeah, like Kiara said, like give them your statement of purpose and even ask them for feedback because they really know what grad schools want to see and what they're looking for. And one tip I have for people is like, even if you're planning to take time off between undergrad and grad, you should just ask your faculty to write you letters of recommendation now to keep on file for future use, since they know you now, they remember you now. If you decide to go back in like 4 or 5 years, they're gonna be like, okay, like I sort of remember you, but I've seen about like 400 students since you've graduated, so I don't really know. Yeah, and also taking the GRE earlier, getting a good enough score is good enough. You don't need a perfect score. But if you really are unhappy with it, you can sign up again in October or November, but that's for the general GRE. For subject tests, like Kiara said, they are only offered on certain days and in certain places. Yeah, and also start asking your school if they have some sort of like career advancement fund or something similar. So normally these are funded through like your career prep offices or the financial aid office. But basically they can be used for GRE fees and application fees. And yeah, I think between my financial aid office and our like Life Beyond Read office, I saved like $1,500 in fees, which is a lot. Yeah, so we can go to the next slide. Okay, so in October through November, you just keep working on your statement of purpose. Sometimes you're gonna be required to write both like a personal statement and a research statement. It depends. You should probably like look through all of the grad school applications and make sure you have everything that you need. If you want to retake the GRE, but you probably won't have to. And then also emailing the graduate programs like directly to see if they have fee waivers. It was pretty easy. I sent an email to my financial aid office to get like a letter that said I was on financial aid. And then I forwarded it to a bunch of all of the programs that I was applying to. And some were like, yeah, we'll waive it. Like, don't worry about it. And then some were like, no, you still have to pay. So yeah, applying to grad school is expensive. Grad school is expensive. and so on and so forth. Yeah, so then at least for computer science, most of the program deadlines are on December 15th. Some, at least one that I applied to was December 12th, and some are all the way up into January. And some allow recommenders to submit up to a week late. So it's just good to use a spreadsheet to keep track of all of the things you need to do, all of your deadlines, and also making sure your recommenders don't miss the deadlines, because that's also really important. And once everything is submitted, you just wait and you keep waiting for a few months. You could apply to jobs or summer internships in the meantime, or try to figure out something to do over the summer. Personally, I did nothing the summer after I graduated, so that was nice. It was a nice break before starting grad school. Yeah, and probably don't adopt a cat right before grad school. Maybe wait until grad school and everything's settled. For the record, I have 2 cats. Okay, next slide. Yeah, so let's talk about paying for graduate school. So like Kyle said in the beginning, grad school is free. And by free, we mean like they pay for your tuition and they'll pay you a stipend, which means basic living expenses, food, a house, maybe transportation. Anecdotally, from what I've talked with my friends, these stipends can be anywhere from $1,400 to $2,000 a month after taxes. I think the highest I've heard is actually $2,200, but that might have been California. Yeah, private institutions generally pay better. I know 3 friends, one at Northwestern, one at Boston University, and another one. They all get paid over the summer, even if they're not at school. Whereas for me at Maryland, I had to either TA over the summer or be a research assistant over the summer. Or if I wasn't either of those, they wouldn't pay me and I would have to like, if I wanted to do nothing, I would just be unpaid. Or I could go do an internship and make a lot more money. Yeah, also as a computer scientist, we do have a lot of funding, especially those in AI and machine learning, they tend to get the most grants. And another important thing to consider is the cost of living. For example, California is really expensive, but generally UC schools pay well. Cost of living in DC area is also really expensive, but the UMD stipend where I went is like relatively really low. And also you want to consider things like how much does health insurance cost? Like if you can't stay on your parents' insurance, do you need a car in the place that you're going to be moving to? Because that's another expense. Or can you like take the bus or bike around? Like that's a lot cheaper than owning a car. Yeah, so when you're deciding on grad schools, being able to talk to current students about their impressions of their stipend and the cost of living and the workload is really important. Yeah, and also generally a good question to ask them is if they're unionized or working on it, because also anecdotally, it sounds like unionized grad students are happier or at least paid better. We can go to the next slide. Okay, so where is this money coming from? You can be a research assistant, RA, teaching assistant, TA, or grad assistant, GA. When I say grad assistant, sometimes that just means being like an administrative assistant, an office assistant. That doesn't normally happen, but sometimes like there's no TA ships available, but GA ships are normally available, especially if you're a PhD student, because they normally guarantee to fund you in some way or another. So they have to make sure you get a job. So most people going into grad school start off as TAs or GAs. That means working about 20 hours per week. I put 20 hours in quotes because when I TA'd, I worked anywhere from like 8 to 10 hours a week, depending on if I was lecturing or if I was grading papers and how confusing students' answers were on those papers and how much time it took to grade them. But yeah, with lecturing, I think I only worked about like 8 hours a week because 2 hours counted as lecture prep time. Yeah, and while you're in your first year or 2 of grad school, you want to try to find faculty to research with. Through this path, you can get an RA. It's not a big deal if you don't go into grad school not knowing what you want to do exactly. I went in being like, oh, crypto something, I think. And yeah, so I sort of just worked with a professor who like gave me papers to read until I like proved to him that I was good enough for an RA. Yeah, so along the lines of like trying to find someone to fund you for research, when you take classes in grad school, generally they can be or end with like some kind of research project. And that's a good opportunity to like try to figure out who you want to work with, since generally the grad classes are taught by the faculty that you want to work with, or you can take courses with faculty you want to work with. Yeah, so once you have an RA-ship, basically you're just paid to go do research and do classes, and doing research varies from field to field. I think like some people do a lot of field work and some people sit behind the computer a lot, and some people have a mix of both. And then once you're done with classes, you're just paid to do research if you have an RA-ship. Otherwise, you TA while also researching still, which is okay. Yeah, and it's always like, okay, yeah, no, you can go, it's fine. Yeah, in terms of the stipend being kind of low, there's also supplemental income that you can consider. Some people go straight into grad school, some people take time off. I know a few people who took time off and saved a lot of money and are very comfortable in grad school, and that seems like a really good plan. There's also fellowships that pay at least on par with this institution that you're at. For example, the GRFP or the Ford Foundation or NDSEG, these are all fellowships that yeah, will basically pay for your tuition and pay a nicer stipend. I believe Microsoft is actually $42,000 a year for the stipend, whereas NSF is $34,000 a year. Yeah, and also looking for scholarships or organizations that are directed at underrepresented minorities, because they really want you to apply. I was just in a like focus circle about the ACES scholarships, and some inside knowledge, apparently not enough people applied to the ACES until growing the legacy scholarship. So everyone who applied got it because there weren't even enough applicants. And that was like $15,000 a year. No, it was $10,000 a year. Yeah, and it was tax-free, which was nice. Yeah, so ACES is one of those. And other sources of income, some people suggest taking out loans if it's not ideal. Like some people already have loans from undergrad, some don't, some people just don't want loans. Yeah, so it's like up to you, it's personal preference. The other thing you could do is intern during the summer. This would be in lieu of researching or teaching. This won't make you fall behind in terms of research, no matter how it feels. And it will help you with financial stress during the school year. There's also summer research internships with industry companies. And with that, there's potential to stay on the payroll part-time during the school year. I have a few friends who did that, and that was pretty smart. But you also have to be at the boss's whims and do what they want for research. And I also have a few friends who did like a restaurant job or like a cafe waitering job while they're in grad school. And it seems like a lot of work on top of grad school, which is already a lot of work. Okay, next slide. Oh, okay, so yeah, I would like to thank everyone for coming and for taking the time out of your day to listen to us talk about grad school. I'll give it back to Kyle.
Awesome, thank you. So now we're gonna have a short Q&A. There are a few questions that popped up throughout the presentation. We just want to give a pub. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. You can also check out our website, honoascholars.org, for updates. And also, because we're kind of on this topic of graduate school funding already, I just also want to pub that tomorrow we have a workshop for the NSF GRFP. So that's one of those like multi-year fellowships where you can get fully funded kind of tuition and a nice $34,000 stipend to fund your way through grad school. But I encourage like any of you, if you're interested, then please do sign up for that. I think right now we have about 30 people signed up and we would love to have more. So we'll move on and we'll start with some of the questions that popped into our Q&A. So the first one is, how do you decide between a master's and a PhD? So if anyone would like to take that.
I can take
Do a
it.
PhD, drop out with a master's. It's free.
That's a good point. There's also certain things where certain fields, a master's will get you as much as a PhD will, and certain fields you need a PhD for entry. So it's a kind of barrier to entry in certain things. For example, my field, that you can't really do much without a PhD in terms of missions or anything, unless you want to be an engineer. And engineers only really need bachelor's or master's max. But there are definitely other, sorry, my roommate's vacuuming. There are definitely like, you don't want to maybe do more school than you want to, unless it's free and you really enjoy it.
How did you choose the school that you're at or went to?
Oh yeah, I can do a little bit, keep it short. So yeah, I second everyone. It can be hard at first to find friends if you're in a new place. And then it's, it gets easier. And like in terms of my grad school life, I didn't grow up here in Hawaii, but my family is here, my dad's family. So I have like this life where I spend a lot of time with my dad's family. But I also have this life where I spend with a social group of like grad students from my lab or other labs that do kind of adjacent work. And then I also do something completely unrelated, which is teach ballet to kids at a local dance studio. And so you kind of find different things to get involved with no matter where you are. And it's nice to have friends. Like you should try to make friends in grad school because they do definitely help you through a lot of the hardship and they understand what's going on. But in terms of how I decided which grad school to go to, it was really understanding what I wanted to do. And I wanted to work with planets and I wanted to work with specific like Mars, Moon kind of things. And there's only about 3 schools that do that, right? So I applied to the 3 schools that do that. I also applied to other schools that didn't do that, and I didn't get into those. I got into the 3 schools that did the thing that I wanted to do, and I think they could sense that from the application. And then you decide by going. I decided by going and talking to the students. The students at one of the schools I went to, they were very nice, but I got weird vibes from that school, and I decided not to go there. And decided to go to UH because the environment was better, the lab was better, the people were better, and I could still be close to family. So that was how I decided on UH. I'm not sure, maybe Makana or Sharice, how you guys decided which grad school to go to.
Does Sharice want to go first? Or
I can keep it short. I didn't choose grad school chose me is what I always tell people, because I had gotten a pretty good scholarship as an undergrad, so I was already at HBU, and then going into grad school because I was kind of promised some funding from my professor, and when I applied I got a pretty good scholarship. It was just like, well, guess I'm gonna stay at HBU. And I mean, it wasn't the end of the world for me because I was so close to family and it was an environment that I was familiar with, so it was completely fine.
for me, I went to grad school not knowing what I wanted to do, besides like stay in computer science, I guess. So I looked at the top 50 ranked grad schools in CS, and then I went through all of them, looked at all of their faculty, and then applied to the ones that I was interested in, which ended up being like 15 schools. And then I decided on Maryland because that was the best one I got into, and Jonathan Katz was there, and he is a big time crypto person, so I thought it'd be really cool to work with him. But it turns out our mentor-mentee style was not the best match. I prefer someone more hands-on, and he was very hands-off. So then that's why I sort of like dithered on to other things.
Oh, thank you for sharing. There was one of the other things that we kind of talked about are like kind of the hardships in grad school. So I was wondering if anyone wanted to share like things that maybe you regret or like things you would do differently, maybe in the application process, or like are there things you don't like in grad school, or like, you know, like if anyone wants to respond. Yeah.
I can start if that's okay. One of the things that I learned really quickly is that if you have a problem or if you have a question, if you cannot figure it out, you really need to ask. Like, just don't. I'm really timid about asking questions, and I learned that really early on. And because if you don't ask, you're not gonna progress on your thesis. You're not gonna finish anything. And I had a similar experience to McKenna, where my advisor was really hands off, and she really let me do what I wanted. And that was a little bit of a learning curve for me, because I'm not done yet, obviously. But like, I learned how to be, as I see it, annoying. Like, I just know that I need to ask all these questions. I need to get like all of my questions I want. I need to just put it in a list. And once I finally see her, because my advisor is like out and about, she has stuff to do. She's not always there. She has children. So like, I learned how to work around and how to accomplish my goals while still like accommodating her schedule. And it was a little annoying, me being annoying, and this like having to work around somebody else, but it's not all about you. So you need to learn, you just need to adjust to people, to working with other people, basically.
Yeah, so grad school is really, I think that I would have taken a gap year if I knew better, if I had been more prepared. So that's the kind of thing, like your senior year of college, you're stressed about grad school or jobs or just what you're going to do after college. And maybe think of, if you're here, you're already thinking about it early, probably, but I didn't even think about what I was going to do after college until the summer before my senior year. And then I said, oh gosh, I'm going to have to go to grad school because I don't know what jobs would accept me with my degree that I actually want to do. So I applied to grad school, and I just hoped that I would get in because I didn't know what job I was going to work other than as like I worked retail. And I was like, I might have to work retail for my gap year so I could, yeah. So, you know, think about it early and then maybe send in applications earlier, start talking to people more than a year out. And if you can take a gap year in that industry, you still have to apply early, which I wasn't prepared for, but like it can really prep you for if you actually want to do that work.
Yeah, I agree with both Chase and Kiara, everything they've said so far. Grad school is tough. Yeah, I also probably would have told myself to do a job first instead, and figure out your research interests before you go, because I did one RU in natural language processing the summer before my senior year, and that made me decide I didn't want to do natural language processing in grad school, which isn't really a research interest, it's a research non-interest. So my research interest like statement was, I want to teach and I liked my algorithms class, and that wasn't really a research interest. But yeah, it is really about research, at least in computer science, like what you want to do. Yeah, so probably would have taken time off and figured it out first. I'm actually on leave right now from grad school. Technically, I'm in a PhD program. I'm on leave and I have like 1 more year to decide if I want to go back or not. So yeah, we'll see. I'm having fun at my job though. It's really chill. I'm way less stressed. And yeah, my anxiety is way down. So good things from a job. But also, yeah, I mean, grad school is great. It's just, you know, not for everyone, and that's okay.
Awesome. Cool. And then there's one more in the Q&A. What is daily life like as a grad student? So yeah.
I can take this one first. I think it varies a lot on what you're doing and what time of year it is. But if you are, if like, for example, it's during the year, it's in your first couple of years, you're going to be taking classes, and those are to get your master's, usually have a class requirement. So it's about 30 credits. So you're taking maybe 2 classes a semester at UH. It would be 3, maybe 2, 3. It varies based on school and program. And then on top of that, you would either have a TA-ship if you have that kind of funding, or a GA or an RA like Makana went over. And depending on what you have, basically determines how much work you have. If you have like a RA, usually you spend more than 20 hours a week that they say you're going to be spending working on your project. You spend a lot of time in the lab, and you don't get paid for that time, because you get paid 40 hours a week, and then they have it because half of it is you're supposed to be going to school, right? So 20 hours a week you're at school, 20 hours a week you're working, but you're working more like 40 hours a week, and then 20 hours a week you're taking classes. That's, it's okay. It's not the best usually. It's difficult to manage, and I'm not sure how TA-ships work because I haven't had them, but I think it depends on your grading load, and if you're teaching, you have to prep for classes, and if it's your first time teaching that class, right? But if you're in an environment where they let you take the weekends off and they don't bother you on the weekends, I highly recommend that, because that's what I do. But sometimes schools don't let you do that, and the culture is such that you're expected to be in at work on the weekends. But over the summer at UH, we get paid overload, which means if we work 40 hours a week on our research over the summer, instead of our classes, we get paid for 40 hours a week, which has really been nice because you make a little bit of extra money over the summer. But other than that, it's, during the year it's classes and research or TAing. And then during the summer, if you're lucky, you might be doing just research or going on trips or something in terms of like field work.
I was also wondering, like, I know like some of the beginning stuff, like people go on trips. I was wondering like if anyone had a few places or like trips or like cool places they went as a grad student. Like conferences, research, field work, anything.
I can start. So for travel, I think I've gone to 2 conferences so far. I was supposed to have gone on like 2 more during 2020, but they all got put virtually. So for the research cruise, we have these cork sites, or they're like wells at the bottom of the ocean, like in just along like the rift axes. So that was out of Oregon. We flew to Oregon and then took a research vessel out to basically the middle of the ocean, and just were there on site for 2 weeks. And I also like to do this fun thing where my advisor doesn't take me to Disney. I really wish she did, but I always try to plot my conferences around trying to make it to Disney. I never actually made it in grad school. I've gone before, but we've gone to a few conferences in DC and one in California, which was, the one in California was actually pretty cool. They like rented out this off-season beach hotel, and we were just there for like a week. That was a very stressful conference, but it was when you're in certain fields for research, so mine happens to be like the deep subsurface, they usually have smaller conferences, and at these smaller conferences, they'll like have it at different venues where you're able to network and talk to people, and they'll look for like grad students or postdocs, or you can find more positions that way. But they'll just have like super small conferences, and it's on a very specific thing, like viruses at the bottom of the ocean.
Yeah, I'm part of like I'm really lucky in that my lab's pretty well funded, and we also do stuff that requires a lot of mainland travel. So my boss has a lot of NASA money, so we get to go to like LA a lot, which is why we go to Disney sometimes. But we also have like one conference we always have to go to Houston for. So every year we go to Houston which is like less fun, but it's still Houston. But I think the coolest thing that we've gotten to do is that they have like moon samples in Houston, and we've gotten to work with those lunar samples that were unopened for years since Apollo. We got to fly there and do that. And then once I got sent to France, which was really lucky for one of those smaller conferences that was like highly specialized. And I got to go around France for a couple of weeks with me and like another grad student. And that was super great.
For me, I mentioned I went to the crypto conference in San Diego. That was fun. It was a week and a half of a lot of crypto and an open bar every single night. So that was really interesting seeing my advisor and all of these really famous researchers drinking and talking to them. So that was fun. I also got to go to Chicago and the Big Island for those grad cohorts by the Computing Research Association. That was fun. There was also a conference in New York City for real world crypto. And yeah, and then I was also supposed to go to New Orleans and Houston or Dallas. No, maybe it was Austin. One of those Texas cities, but then COVID. So yeah, I mean, there's travel funded in grad school. It's fun. It's a nice break.
Awesome, thank you. And we are nearing time, so we'll just have our last question is, what advice would you give to people who are starting their senior year and starting to apply to graduate schools this fall?
Do your research on what schools and see if you can get people to pay for your application fees. I think that and the GRE fees, those add up. So just, pick your schools carefully. Don't apply to a ton of them because it adds up if they don't give you the money to apply. And then, be really, really nice to people you're asking for your recommendation letters for, like buy them presents when they agree.
Cherise?
Yes. I would say you should email potential advisors and ask first, and you should ask them if they have funding for grad students. So I know one of my friends did that, and that kind of like eliminates your schools. And also you should definitely look at the funding situation for the different schools, because at HBU they only offer you at max of 50% GA, so you're in charge of the other 50% of the tuition. So for me to get around that, I ended up working I work at the IT squad at HBU, which has nothing to do with my degree, but I very much enjoy telling people to turn their machines off and on again and fixes all the problems. So like finding things like that, whether you need to do a small job or, like do a small part-time job, or if you have to, if you have to do a small part-time job, that's another thing. Just find something that's pretty chill where all you have to do is kind of sit there. That really helps.
On Sharice's note about emailing professors, also check their website before you do, because sometimes they have a note that says, do not email prospective students. Don't even talk to me unless you're already admitted. I will not respond to you. So there's that. And I forgot my other thought, but the other advice is good.
Oh, I have one more thing, which is I think it's pretty important, is that if you have to pay to go to grad school, you probably don't want to go there. If they're asking you to pay for a STEM degree, law school you have to pay usually, and med school you have to pay, and business school you have to pay, but for a STEM degree you should not have to pay to go to grad school. They should have some form of funding for you.
Awesome, great advice, folks. But yeah, just another reminder, we have an NSF GRFP workshop tomorrow. So definitely go to honoascholars.org. I think that's our website, or also our Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, and you can find the links to sign up for those events. But I'd like to thank Kiara, Sharice, and Makana for sharing their mana'o today and helping us learn more about what grad school is and what we can expect as we apply. Thank you. And thank you everyone for attending. And we hope to see you at another event sometime in the future. Yeah, bye.